Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday, February 22nd, 2024 electronic meeting of the Environmental Commission. This meeting is in accordance with the executive orders that were set in place in 2020, all that long ago by the Governor Whitmer to effect social distancing and mitigate the spread of COVID-19. We intend to conduct the meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. Please be patient if there are technical issues. Public comment is welcome and will be via telephone only. To speak in public comment, call 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 962-0336-6452. This information is on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 19, and AT&T channel 99. Also on a2gov.org. Watch CTN. With that, I would like to welcome everyone again, and I would like to ask Ms. Donnelly to call the roll for the meeting. I'm sorry, that was wrong. Wrong order of business. The land heritage statement. If you could read that, please.
Sure, thank you. I acknowledge that land the city of Ann Arbor occupies is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, including Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi and Wyandot peoples. I further acknowledge that our city stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained generally in unconscionable ways from Indigenous peoples. The taking of this land was formalized by the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Knowing where we live, work, study, and recreate does not change the past, but a thorough understanding of the ongoing consequences of this past can empower us in our work to create a future that supports human flourishing and justice for all individuals.
Thank you. And now would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Councilmember Ackman.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Vice Chairperson Brown.
I'm here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Callawert.
Here.
Commissioner Curtis.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Dale.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Dish. She mentioned she would be absent today. Commissioner Graham. He also sent a message. I think he was going to be absent. Commissioner Gruber. Absent. Commissioner Marson, I think, is also absent today. Commissioner Mirsky.
You're in Ann Arbor.
Chairperson Mitchell.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Nedrich.
She told me that she would be absent today.
And Commissioner Wahing. Just saw Commissioner Gruber pop on too. Okay, great.
I'm good.
Okay, great. It's a quorum.
Okay, just right. Thank you. All right, so let's move forward with the next item of business, and I would like to ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
I so move.
Thank you, Steve and Commissioner Gruber. Thank you. Any discussion of the agenda? None. Let's move to accept the agenda. If you do, please raise your hand. I see hands. Okay, thank you. And next is, thank you, the agenda is approved. A motion to approve the minutes from January 25th last month.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Mirsky. A second. Commissioner Ackman, thank you. Any discussion of the minutes from last month? All right, So let's, of those who approve of the minutes, raise your hand. And, okay, great, let's move forward. Thank you. And we'll move into our first item of business. And I want to just mention a little bit of meeting process that I'd like to use for tonight, which is, it seems like we don't have very much to talk about, but I think we do. And I want to make sure that we use our time well. And so I would like for us to have about a 10 to 15 minute presentation, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of questions, depending how things flow. And in the process of questions, I think it would be great if we do a rotation among those who have a question. So it'd be one question per commissioner, then move to the next person, and then if, rotate through as questions come up. So I'll appreciate that approach. And with that, I would like to introduce Sarah Mason, the Resource Recovery Manager for the City of Ann Arbor, who will talk to us. Oops.
Would do public comment real quick.
Public comment.
Oh, jeez. I just want to get into the business. Okay, so sorry. Sarah, I want to hear from you. Here we go. All right, public comment. I'm sorry. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 888-788-0099 as seen on the screen and enter meeting ID 962-0336-6453. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand by pressing by calling out the 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand, please press *9 on your phone. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. Then press *6 to unmute your phone. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Thank you. And Ms. Donnelly, any callers in the wings?
I am not seeing anybody.
Okay, give just a couple of seconds. Anyone showing up? Okay.
Nobody.
All right, I will return to my previous approach. And again, introduce and welcome Sarah Mason, Resource Recovery Manager for the City of Ann Arbor. She'll discuss progress on the Solid Waste Resources Management Plan and recent changes on the composting program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, and thank you for providing information for us, Sarah.
Excuse me. Thank you so much, Chair Mitchell. Good evening, commissioners. I'm happy to be back here with you all again this evening. As mentioned, I'm going to give an overview of the status for our 2019-2023 Solid Waste Resource Management Plan. There was a memo provided that gives a lot of detail. I'm going to give a summary. I think for the purpose of this discussion, I can go through things quickly, and then any questions that you all might have, I'll be happy to address those. So at an overview, just as a reminder, so the planning period for that plan, 2019-2023, was a 5-year period. The plan, however, was not officially adopted until October of 2020. So we were a little bit into that time frame once it was approved. And we are still very much working on several of the recommendations within the plan. The plan made a total of 24 recommendations over 6 different areas: residential, commercial, education and outreach, downtown, diversion facilities, and funding. And I wanted to say, let's see, I have, Erin, am I able to share my screen? I have yes, I see the button. Perfect.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Okay. I didn't prepare a large PowerPoint because we do have the memo, but I did want to just share with this sort of summary table so that you can see at a glance what's been completed and what's in progress, what's for the future. And we have at least one recommendation that was superseded because we went a different direction with the contract. So in total, we've completed 13 of the 24 recommendations. We have 4 more that are underway, 6 that have not yet been considered but are slated for future consideration. And as I mentioned, the one that has been superseded. I also want to highlight that many of the things that we've completed the objective, but there's much of the work is still in progress, especially when it comes to a lot of our education work. And you know, we're continuing to provide awareness around HHW events, electronics recycling, and things like that. So even though we've accomplished a lot, these recommendations are still very much guiding work that staff are doing, as well as we are expecting Washtenaw County will be getting their materials management planning process as required by the state in the next probably few months. And we also have a lot of funding that's becoming available through different grant programs to support solid waste programs that we haven't seen in some time. And so to ensure that we can know what will be included in the county plan, and then also to allow staff to look at some of those grants to help continue work that we're doing and expand it, we are not intending to start a new planning period until at least the fiscal year 26. So that would be July 1, 2026 would be the start of that year. We think we've got enough here that's still underway to keep us busy and to allow us to focus on hopefully securing some of those grant dollars as well. So, Commissioner Brown, I see your hand up. Did you have a question?
Oh, yes, Sarah, just a quick one. I mean, I understand why, staff is recommending doing this, but I'm just wondering a few things. Does council need to approve this extension formally in a more formal manner?
City
I'm not
council need to approve it, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't think so. But that's a good question. I can take that back and find out if we
Okay.
need to have some sort of approval of that.
Okay, I was just wondering about that. And then fiscal year, and then when you say fiscal year 26, it's not clear when the planning will start or when the plan will commence. I'm not sure what that means.
Right. So at this time, we don't think there will be any of the planning effort until that time. So I can't say when that will happen, because prior to that, there would need to be an RFP to hire likely a consultant to help with a new
That's
plan.
correct. That's correct. So the RFP won't be issued until like July of 2025. And
Yes.
I just want to mention that the last process took about 2 years to complete. So that means you really wouldn't have a plan in effect until, fiscal year 28, which is a long ways away.
It is a long ways away. I can't say that an updated plan would take that same period of time. This was a very comprehensive approach that included a lot of review of programs and services offered by the city. I think we've made a lot of progress. And so I don't know that a future plan would necessarily need to take that 2-year time period. But I can't say that now because that's to be determined.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Yeah. You're welcome. And another thing that I had been asked about was just how this current SHWRP and the A20 plan fit together. So I did just want to highlight A20 was adopted after the Solid Waste Resource Management Plan. And so in many ways, it was able to pull from some of the recommendations that were within that plan for Strategy 5, which is around the way we use and dispose and handle of our materials. So this shows you that there's on the different topics, the part of A2 Strategy 5, and then the part of the SHWRP that ties that together. So you can see that there are many areas where there was overlap between the two plans. So I'm going to stop sharing right now so that I can see on my screen. Okay. Just wanted to get back to my update so that I can just walk quickly through there, because there are 24 of them. So I'll try to keep it brief and you all have the same information. But to touch on what we have, starting with the residential recommendations, the first one was to implement year-round compost collection to allow for food scraps to be collected during the winter. And we were able to implement that starting in January of 22. So we've had that going for a couple of years now. And it's been working well, I think, and we are seeing increased volume, each year that we've had that in place. The second residential recommendation was around curbside textile collection. That's not something that we've yet considered, and we've slated that to take up that recommendation in fiscal year 25 to see if that's a program that we want to move forward with. The third residential recommendation was for curbside bulky item collection, and I do understand that this, along with the compost collection, were two of the more popular recommendations from the engagement that was done. And so one of the things that was suggested was to look for ways to provide that bulky item collection. When we put out our RFP for our commercial solid waste franchise collection contract, which is the franchise hauler for commercial refuse, we added in as an option, if proposers wanted to provide it, pricing to provide curbside collection. And we did get that pricing from WM, who was awarded the contract. But further down in the recommendations for funding, you will see that anything that's offered on a periodic basis, it's recommended to find funding for that before it's implemented. So we've got the pricing now, that's step one. A second piece of that would be to find funding and understand how that would be covered to implement that program. Residential recommendation 4 was around promoting HHW collection and electronics collection, things that are already happening in the county. We do have that on the city's website and continue to keep that updated. Washtenaw County has made a few improvements, changes to their programs. They do things by appointment now at both of their home toxic centers. They have the one on Zebro, and then this past year, a new location opened at the Arbor Hills landfill, as well as they started doing appointments for their cleanup days. And they have reported that that's really improved the experience for both those coming as well as their staff, because it's able to meter out the visits throughout the day instead of having a big rush of people at one time. But in case you weren't aware of that, that's required now to use those services. The residential recommendation 5 was around the formation of WARMA, which has formed and the city is now a constituent member of. So I do sit on the board for WARMA. I'm currently the vice chair, so very active, always in the meetings and very well aware of the activities of WARMA. They have not yet taken up anything related to HHW or electronics. They've been focused on a collections contract for 4 of the communities for their trash, recycle, and compost collection. That's the big effort that WARMA has been taking on. Most recently, prior to that, they had a grant from the Recycling Partnership to do curbside cart tagging and recycling education for the communities. And then residential recommendation 6 was to do a competitive procurement for curbside residential recycling collection. That was completed, and there was a 5-year collection contract awarded to Recycling Ann Arbor that was effective July 1, 2021, and that agreement has 1 2-year extension available. So we're still in the first term of that. Moving on to the commercial recommendations, the first one was around doing an ordinance for fog collection and perhaps having some sort of requirement in place with a fee attached to it for those hauling fog, which is fats, oils, and grease. That's another recommendation that we have slated to take up consideration of next year. It's not one that we've worked on to date. Commercial recommendation 2 was around offering compost collection for commercial businesses for food scrap. And that's another piece that we put in our RFP for the commercial solid waste franchise collection. And that was a mandatory response. So we did say that you had to provide pricing for that. We only got one vendor that did provide that pricing, and that was WM, who was awarded the contract. They've subcontracted with My Green Michigan to provide that service. So commercial customers who are interested can sign up for that service under that contract. Commercial recommendation 3 was around supporting student turnover and move in and move out in May and roughly August of each year. And this is another thing where we have accomplished the objectives of this recommendation. The city does offer free dumpster tips for property managers on a set number of days at each of those times. We also offer drop-off services at 2000 South Industrial, which is, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the collection that Recycling Arbor used to use downtown. That space had a lot of challenges. It couldn't be secured. It led to a lot of illegal dumping. So moving it to our 2000 South Industrial site, that's a gated site. So we can close it off when we're not there because we're only there during the day collecting things. We've also been able to expand what we're diverting. So we have Kiwanis on site that takes household items in good condition. We also divert scrap metal for recycling. We've partnered with DART to collect styrofoam. There's a lot of block styrofoam when you buy new things for recycling. And then we also last year had a grant from Washtenaw County, a sponsorship agreement to do mattress recycling with MyBark, which is up in Emmett County. And so we were able to divert one semi-trailer of mattresses to them for recycling, and that went well. So we're hoping that we might be able to expand that in the future. We do get a lot of mattresses at that fall event. In addition to those services, we have also recently contracted with Iris Waste Diversion Specialist. We brought a consultant on board to help facilitate a community-wide planning effort. We've had 2 meetings to look for ways that we can have more partnerships within the community to divert more of the material that's in good condition to those who can use it. So we've have moving companies, storage companies, nonprofits, the university, the apartment association, property managers, cast a very big net. And we've had a lot of enthusiasm around that. There's a lot of exciting things that are already happening. And so having a collaborative effort will allow us to amplify those efforts and also just bring better communication to students so they'll know what their options are for off-campus students, what they're going to do with their stuff when they get ready to move. Then the commercial recommendation, the 4th one was around collecting data to support a possible construction and demolition diversion ordinance. That's something many of you have been very involved with. We've worked closely with the Circular Economy Working Group here with the Environmental Commission to do some research on that. So we're building upon some work that was already done by some commissioners, by the university, by some of our interns. And we have talked to now 4 different communities because we actually did, 3 different communities. We talked to King County this week, Washington, but looking at what are the best components, like what works well. So we're looking at the written ordinance, but we're also talking to the folks who are administering this on a day-to-day basis to see, like, does this work as you thought? And if not, what would you do different? And what have you experienced over the years to see what might be a good fit for Ann Arbor? So that's an ongoing project. C5 is around doing more inspection and enforcement for commercial properties for compliance with recycling. There was a recommendation in the plan that we would need to add staff to fully carry this out, and we have not yet added that staff. So we're not doing this as it's written. I will say that when I get to the education recommendations, our contract with the Ecology Center for Education Outreach and Marketing is very broad and does include a commercial piece that is more of a technical assistance, but where they're going directly to businesses and helping them. You know, they're looking at their waste containers, they're looking at what they generate, they're providing very tailored feedback for them to train their staff better, work with their customers better, to get more material into the recycling bin. So I think we are actually touching on this, just not exactly as it's suggested here. And then commercial recommendation 6 was around consolidating all contracted services, like so any commercial property that trash, recycle, and compost would be done by one hauler. And that recommendation was not implemented. So our new commercial refuse trash collection for commercial franchise collection is just for trash, with the subscription for compost, and recycling is still provided either by the city or by Recycling Harbor, depending on if it's a dumpster or cart. So that did not happen as written. Education and outreach recommendations, really all 4 of these were addressed through this contract that we have with the Ecology Center. So that contract covers 5 different work areas. It includes a social-based marketing campaign, which you'll be hearing more about soon. We've been busy working on that, and I think it's going to be really exciting when we get it launched. And then they are also doing work. They're doing youth education. We did revise that a little bit. I think I've spoken to that before, but we do every 2nd grader and every 7th grader in AAPS gets education and outreach from the Ecology Center. We also do the commercial program I spoke about. We're doing a multifamily program that city staff and the Ecology Center are working on together. Similarly, we're doing site visits. We're walking with the property manager. We're looking at their containers, making sure that they have flyers to provide for their tenants as required by code, making sure that they have the appropriate stickers and signage for their containers, and just establishing that point of contact so that we can work with them more to make sure that we're getting information to the half of our residents that live in multifamily units. And then it also includes events. So they go to community events, they do tabling events, they give presentations, and that's that recommendation number 3 around doing that grassroots outreach. The Ecology Center is doing that for us as well. So really through that agreement, we've touched on all 4 of those education recommendations. The 4th one being the reporting. They provide a summary report for each work area as well as an executive summary each year. We're just 1 full year into the contract. The contract runs August to August. So we have 1 year down, but yeah, so we'll get more reports from them in August for the work that it's undergoing right now. The downtown recommendations, so the first one was around adding Saturday and Sunday collection. I'm happy to say that in the summer of 22, the city started picking up recycling on Saturday. So all the recycling containers downtown are picked up on Saturday. It was previously Monday through Friday. And then in addition to that, we look ahead and plan, say, like for Labor Day, which is a Monday holiday, but we know it's a busy weekend. We actually schedule overtime for Sunday. So we make sure that we hit those dumpsters on Sunday so they're not going Saturday to Tuesday without getting a collection. And then in our new contract with WM, they were previously offering service Monday through Saturday. They had pricing for Sunday, but it was more expensive than the other days. And in our new agreement, Sunday is the same cost as any other day. So we have moved all of the shared compactors downtown to 7 days a week. And we have also moved some of the dumpsters where it's warranted to like where there's enough volume to that 7-day-a-week collection. So those that recommendation has been implemented. And then the second downtown recommendation was around kind of in line with that, consolidating containers, trying to remove carts from downtown and get things more into dumpsters and compactors. The carts are numerous and they look a little bit messy. And so under the new WM contract, they also pick up all the trash downtown. So whether it's in a cart, dumpster, or compactor. And so they're also working to move some of those cart customers into dumpsters and compactors so that we can do that consolidation. So that is something that is underway and will probably be a bit of a continuous process for some time as they get those customers converted over. And the last downtown recommendation was around having like a provider just for downtown and then separate collection agreements for downtown only. And again, like the objective of that was achieved in that we have one recycling collector and one trash collector. So the city collects all of the recycling within the downtown area, whether it's a cart or a dumpster, and Waste Management collects all the trash. And so that has simplified the communication for customers to know who to contact if they have an issue with their service, because if it's recycling, they contact the city, and if it's trash, they contact WM. The diversion facilities recommendations, I won't go too much into the DOS. I know I've talked to you all about that before, but we did get a grant from Eagle for $850,000, and we hired RRS to do a site design. And now we're currently in the process of working with Recycle Ann Arbor per council resolution to work on an operating agreement. And we've brought in OHM and Stantec to help provide some financial analysis with that. So we have a sound funding model in order to move the project forward. And the second diversion facility recommendation was around having our local MRF back in operation, which we do. So that contract was awarded to Recycle Ann Arbor, and then in December of 21, they reopened and were ready to start accepting material locally for processing, and have been doing it since that time. The funding recommendations I can cover briefly. The first two, the Headley override, and the second one around looking at charging like a clean community fee or a waste diversion fee, we have not yet pursued. And then, as I mentioned in the third funding recommendation, as we have those services such as bulky item collection that have like is periodic, it's not necessarily ongoing, we'll look for how we fund that before we implement it. That is my comments around the status update for the solid waste resource management plan. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much. Looking for anyone to raise your hand. Commissioner Calloward.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, for that information.
John, your voice is really breaking up. It's almost not audible.
Why don't you move on to somebody else?
Okay, all right. Is there another person who has a question? Looks like Commissioner Brown, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. No, I appreciate, all the, everything you've done, you guys have done, and the reasons why you want an extension of the short here, but I just want to point out that, Governor Whitmer submitted her budget, which includes a factor of 13 increase in tipping fees in Michigan from 36 cents a ton to $5 a ton. So for me, this kind of amplifies the need for having strong metrics for diversion. Because just dumping things in the landfill are going to start to become much more costly. So she won't certainly get everything she's asking for, but this $5 a ton target is really just the average of our surrounding states. So the governor's goal is just to prevent Michigan becoming a dumping destination for even the city of Toronto. And so, how can we keep a pure Michigan clean water pledge if we continue, to get things dumped here? So I just want to say that to emphasize that I think it's so important to define SMART goals, and to get that are specific, you understand what I mean by SMART goals, I'm sure.
I'm familiar.
And that also including completion dates for those SMART goals. That's part of the timely thing, like certain things will happen by a certain time, given certain budgets. So I think that might, I don't know, Dharma, you should, chime in here, but I think that would help council, weigh demands from various parts on the city's budget for various programs on the city budget to decide, where to make budget amendments and things like that. That, in other words, if you're going to make that goal, if staff tells you that's the budget that you really need, but you need to specify what the goal is. And I'm not just criticizing you all. I think this is a proper thing to do for all the city departments. So that's the only comment I had. But the question really is, why are you delaying on goals F1 and F2 for seeking extra funding from the millages? Is it because of the grant? Is it because of the upcoming grant opportunities that weren't anticipated in 2020? You know, before the presidential election, or something else?
I think that those opportunities have not been taken up because we had a lot of other things that we were working on. So those are major initiatives. And just in the past couple of years, we've procured the new commercial waste contract. We procured the education contract. We had to renegotiate our compost operations contract, our commercial multifamily collection contract for recycling, and our operating contract for the DOS. So we've been real busy, to be quite honest, getting some of those contracts in place. So I think it's just a timing situation.
Anyone else? So I'll jump in. Sarah, I'd like to know if there are metrics that you use that we just don't see in the information that you've provided. It'd be really great to know more of the volumes or the tonnage than you provided in the report, and just what goals you may have that would allow you to show the progress that I expect is there.
Yes, I do have, I have like, I don't know what happened to it. Let me put it back up here. I have our, sorry. You think after so many years of this, be more adept at talking and navigating the screens. These are our annual solid waste tonnages, which I've shown you before, but it just went to 2022. Of course, now we just closed out calendar year 2023, so we have this information. And what we're trying to do is have this overall number. We want that to go down. So our major goal is to reduce the overall waste generated. COVID helped us out a bit, gave us a little boost on kind of going downward. We saw a little bit of an uptick in 2023, but not terribly significant, nowhere near our trash tonnages from 2018. So we would like to see this continue to decrease, and we haven't formalized a goal yet, but we've been talking about a goal where we might point to a baseline here to say we want to keep our overall waste generation below a baseline, and then also reduce, aim to reduce it by some percentage year over year, which would probably be pretty small, maybe like 1%. There's so many variables that go into waste generation that, we had the ice and snowstorm last year that gave us a boost here on the organics. We don't know that's going to happen. We had a bunch of brush come down. So there's just so many variables on that, that you really do have to track it over a longer time period than just looking, 1 year to the next to know if you're making progress. So, and then we've also been looking at it on a per capita basis. So we're playing around with a few things to see if there are metrics that would help gauge our success, more than just looking at a traditional recycling rate or straight diversion rate.
I certainly think that sharing information with the community will be helpful as well as sort of a motivating. So I'll stop on that one. Commissioner Murski.
Thank you. If I may, just to reinforce some of the points. Well, first of all, I want to say, Sarah, thank you. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for everybody else in Public Works for all the work that you're doing on this. And it's good to see these metrics. I thought I'd just chime in to reinforce some of the points that both Steve and Rita have expressed. I think it would be great if we have updates like this in the future to accompany the report with metrics so that we can see whether or not the actions that we're doing are actually having the desired outcomes. So, we're doing all these actions in the shrimp and A20 with circular economy and everything else because we hope that they will have a direct impact on outcomes. And so it would be great to accompany the report with that. I think that would be an improvement opportunity. And I just want to emphasize two other things. This goes back long before you were with the city, but the shrimp before last ran from 2013 to 2017. The current shrimp is running from 2019 to 23. We heard that it won't be taken up until fiscal year 26. And I actually went back this afternoon and looked at the due dates. The approval of the consultant was 2.5 years before City Council actually approved the shrimp. So even if it's faster this year, the potential is that the new shrimp won't be approved until sometime like 2026, 27, 28. So we see really a domino effect of these delays in all the planning activities. And so I think it's really important what Steve said is that we consider not just start date of an activity. It's what is the due date that we need to have, and then when do we start things to be able to achieve that due date. Yeah, I think those are the main things. Oh, and that's one other thing about metrics. I looked this afternoon on the city's website, and I found by Googling actually or doing a search on the city's website that the city, it says in OSI's charging station newsletter that the city tracks a number of different solid waste metrics, but I couldn't find any of them on the city's website. And so it would be great not only to accompany updates like this and on Legistar. For typical residents, they're not going to be able to go into Legistar and find the Environmental Commission meeting when something like this is presented and tracked, and then go through, for example, the YouTube video. They would go to the city's website to find this kind of information. So it'd be great if the kind of information that you're tracking on diversion rate, tonnages, waste per person, et cetera, like that would all be posted on the city website. So
Yeah,
thanks very much, and keep up the good work. And there's some hopefully opportunities for improvement. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. I do want to mention that the public services area is working on, there's a metrics group that's working on that. So that's information that's underway. It's just not made it to the website yet.
Commissioner Dale?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's exciting to hear that the metrics is underway. I remember years ago there was an indicator, like a spreadsheet that a decade ago or more, I don't know, where it just had like up arrows or down arrows, like which way are we going? Are we going in the right direction? And it was such a great way to just get the overall picture. And I kind of missed that document. But first, thank you for doing such a thorough overview. It's a lot of recommendations to go through and give us updates on all of them. You guys have certainly done a lot and have been very busy, and it's helpful for me to just sort of hear a snapshot like that too. And just one of the thoughts I had, and I'm sure you guys have thought about it as well, but I appreciate wanting to reduce the overall waste to landfill and looking at diversion rates and per capita and all of those other things. And something that we're wanting to get some data at the university is, what is the potential capture rate? Like, there's only so much you can do, right? So how much of the stuff that could be captured if everybody behaved perfectly and perfectly sorted their compost and recycling, what would that even get you? How far could that get you towards a reduction goal? And how much it has to be changed from what people are actually even just purchasing and building that circular economy. That's a much harder task. So I don't know if you guys have, or if that's on your wish list of things to be able to do an audit of the landfill waste to see, well, how much really is even being captured, or is there a lot of recyclables still getting thrown away, and what would that look like? So I'm curious if that's something that you have the capacity to do. Do you have a sense of how much the sort of potential there would be if people did properly place in their service to support all of the different sectors of the city?
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I love capture rate studies. I think that's just super informative. I did that with my previous city when we did our recycling cart tagging. We did paired cart study. I do think we're maybe due for some sort of waste characterization composition study. We've not done one. To my knowledge, I've looked back through in some time, so I think that would be useful. Of course, that's just a thing that they're not inexpensive to do if you want to do it comprehensively and get a representative sample. So you asked if it's on my wish list. I would say yes. Do I have any plans to do it in the near immediate future? No, but it is on my radar that that's something that would be useful for us to do, because I think it's been a little while since we've done it. And I think before it was just a straight composition study, and I would really love to add that capture piece of it. If you're looking at all three streams, then you get an idea not only of what you're capturing, what you're losing to the trash, so to speak, your leakage of potential aluminum cans or PET or whatever that could possibly go in recycling, but you also get a better look at what your contaminants are, even though we do the twice a year composition audits at the MRF. Those are, really once as it's being processed. And so just to look at the raw material, I think is also really helpful. So be excited to hear what you guys do at the university. And yes, I think that would be something great for us to do in the future.
You have a quickie follow-up. That's okay. Is that recycling infrastructure grant from Eagle, is that something can be used for doing an audit that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I thought it was more for infrastructure purposes. I don't know if it'll cover studies, but I could certainly look at that. I haven't read the RFP in detail.
Councilmember Ackman?
I just wanted to respond since a few people brought up metrics, and I can't remember if I reported it back to this group, if Councilmember Dish or I did, but this past summer we passed a resolution about creating dashboards and metrics that would be easily accessible to the public, and that's something that the administration committee is working on with the city administrator in terms of like how that looks. And I think they're able to do some of the work in-house and contract some of it out. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight that I agree. It's important whenever I want to see how we're doing on something. Even I have to dig a bit. So appreciate, just wanting to have ready access to that information, and it is being worked on.
Great. I'm seeing the time kind of slide by here, but Commissioner Mirsky, go ahead.
Real quick question, is there a due date for that? The resolution didn't have a due date, and I'm wondering if there is at least a target date that's sort of been discussed by city leadership together with council as to when that dashboard or whatever the product might be, when that might actually be something that residents would have access to.
Yeah, unfortunately, like I remembered when this happened because Councilmember Briggs and I were working a lot on the language, and we had a date in there, and then somehow it didn't make it to the final version. So you're right, it didn't have a date on it. And I don't have one to share with you now, though I can find out. I think it's mostly being handled in the administration committee. And I know that there was some inquiries recently about getting it going, but I don't remember what the timeline was associated with it. So I can find out and come back.
Good. Great. I guess I have just one more question, and that has to do with the education piece. And I think I feel a little bit sensitive to the transition that happened with respect to the compost and excluding the plastics specifically, and the communication of that, because I feel like there was some confusion in the community. And I just wonder, where will we find the materials that Recycle Ann Arbor provides for education? And are they tested with members of the community for understanding and accurately doing the sorting from home? And are there communications that go to, say, vendors for choice of materials that they put, items that they sell, but food or other things?
So we did do 2 webinars last year for businesses that are in the compost area, and those are posted on our website. So and we actually broke it into like smaller sections. So there's that information that's available. We also do have the list of approved CMAW products that we accept at the compost site, and we're working on making that a little bit more user friendly, and also making maybe like a video to show people how to filter it. But that's really more for like a business that's looking to replace a cup that they're using with a new cup, right? For residents, we understand that that could be maybe a little confusing. So our general guidance is that if you went to a restaurant or coffee shop or something and you come home with an item, it says it's compostable. If it looks and feels like plastic, then it's not accepted. If it looks and feels like paper, then it's probably okay to put in your compost cart. So, especially if it were to say that it is like BPI certified compostable. So although we are not, although our certification, what we care is requiring now is the Compost Manufacturing Alliance Windrow certification. Almost everything that has CMA certification also has BPI certification. The CMA is a further level of testing than what BPI offers. So
A little difficult still with respect to the markings on the containers, I would say. But yeah, okay. All right. I think just going on my suggested timeline, I think I need to stop this discussion, but I really want to say thank you so much, Sarah. I mean, you put a lot of work in preparing the information for us, and I appreciate it very much. Will you accept additional questions from us? I mean, is that we could filter them through Aaron and okay, I would suggest anybody.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
I appreciate it. You all have a good night.
Thank you. All right, thanks for all that discussion, everyone. I am going to move to our next thing, which is discussion of a question that was directed to us by City Council. It's very unusual for us to have this, and so we appreciate the opportunity to give some discussion and feedback to Council on what's called beneficial electrification. And I first want to say a little bit of apology that I asked Aaron to send you some additional information, one of which was a table that I think was really not so helpful. I did look up some more information, but I'm hoping that actually I can ask Councilmember Ackman to give a little bit of assist with kicking off this discussion and the intent of the beneficial electrification. And yeah, so I'll start there. If I need to jump in, I will, but
Yeah, no problem.
thanks.
Just to give people a little bit of a reminder, in June of 2023, City Council passed a resolution that directed the city administrator to identify incentives that would support voluntary efforts to increase emissions reductions. And this was largely in response to the fact that we want people to do things like electrify buildings, create efficient buildings. And right now we have very few sticks to make that happen. And so we heard a lot of feedback from many members of our community that we should be thinking in terms of incentives too. And so that was the focus of this, to get staff to think about how we might think about carrots instead of sticks. So I'm not sure if the original resolution was attached. I think it's at the top of the memo that was provided to us. That was the result of this resolution. But basically what we asked for was for staff to identify incentives that could support voluntary efforts by residents and businesses to increase emissions reductions through a transition to sustainable and clean heating, as well as beneficial electrification. And that they would provide us with a progress report identifying internal processes, particularly in the development review process, that could be modified to increase emissions reductions through a transition. And so the memo that City Council got was, I think, at the start of the year, and it outlines areas that could be a focus. And I don't know if you want to put that, like maybe screen share it or something, Rita, or if that would be helpful. Or if people have
I'm hoping that Aaron can do that.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Give me a second, sorry.
And so it basically starts with creating a new project definition that describes basically what we mean by a sustainable development. For example, is solely commercial kitchen gas for commercial kitchen use and backup power generation that's constructed in a manner that achieves a high energy building envelope, for example, using passive house standards, and that exceeds the minimum required for the Michigan Energy Code. So it starts basically with how do we want to define a green building, for lack of a better term. And then for development projects that meet those criteria, these are some of the incentives that they listed could be potential recommendations. So one is providing a 30% height bonus from the current limit in any zoning district. And as you notice in parentheses, it says this would replace the current similar definition. So currently we have a 30% height bonus on buildings for sustainable, I can't remember how it's worded. I think it says, so right now this is in our UDC. You can have your height increase by up to 30% when the following conditions are met. The development has an affordable housing component or a sustainability component. So that's pretty, it's not really very strictly defined. You could have solar panels on your roof and perhaps qualify for this. So I think what it's asking is for us to have a tighter, greener standard. Other ideas exempt the development from the city's citizen participation requirements, enable site plan approval by the planning manager, and waive site plan review and related entitlement fees. So basically, these three, I think, get at collectively sort of efficiency and moving the process along. So really, I think what this is about is helping people who want to develop green buildings. We know from feedback, and I'm sure that you guys are familiar with this too, that for developers that are really trying to do the right thing, they're still finding themselves kind of stuck at every step. We make it very difficult for them. And so we want to find a way, I think, for developments that meet the standard to, move things along in a more efficient manner to create the kinds of development that we want to see. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I have to say, I guess I should clarify, sorry, before I move on. I think what City Council would be bringing forward in terms of a resolution would not be asking for specific things, but it would be asking for a further kind of description of what we might implement. So this is just a memo at a very high level. And I think that what we would be bringing forward would be basically not telling them exactly what to execute, but asking them to come back with a development of standards that we should use, what a package of incentives would look like, and what our standard would be. What standard would we use for this green building?
Great. Thank you. I like the
Yeah.
idea of the standard. Okay, is anyone waiting in the wings to ask a question? Mr. Calloway.
Is the audio better now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about previously. So I have a very basic question, and apologies if I'm misunderstanding something, but as I read the resolution from council, it was for residents and businesses. But what I'm reading is what's been proposed is solely for developers. And I'm just wondering, am I missing something in the language, or was that how the scope was? Was that is that meeting your expectation, I guess, is the question, or should there be something more specifically for residents?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the way that I was thinking about this was in terms of new developments, but I think it's also true that we know that we have an existing stock of housing that could also use this beneficial electrification, for example. And so I think that some of the residential stuff we're getting at that in other ways with incentives. But I also think that some of what they have outlined here would apply. It is more around a process than it is around a type of resident versus developer, if that makes any sense. So, for example, you could imagine anything that would require a site plan approval potentially. But that's a really good question. I mean, yes, it does meet what I was expecting, but I also see that we said residents and businesses. You know, as I remember the context of this conversation, it was largely around, can we make a ban on gas? You know, new gas hookups and new developments. And so that's been a lot of how I've been looking at what we were asking for and what we got back.
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Curtis. Commissioner Curtis.
So yeah, on 2B, if we eliminate the citizen participation requirements, how would these citizens provide feedback? Or would that be eliminated completely?
I think that's a great question. And I think that no, it would not eliminate citizen participation or comment completely. I believe what this is referring to is the requirement that is set by the city of Ann Arbor, not by the state. It actually goes beyond the state requirement to have a public hearing for each development. A public hearing means that you have to notice it in a certain way in a certain amount of advance time. And so it can make things longer. And what we talked about a little bit in our work session of City Council a couple of weeks ago, that was about economic development, that's talking about some of the same types of things about how could we move certain kinds of development faster. We talked about how you could still have public comment, but not a public hearing. And the notice is just different for it. And so I think what this looks like, it needs to be scoped out further. But this does not mean that citizens don't participate. I think it means how can we move things along that are already meeting our defined standard that's yet to be defined, and what kind of feedback and when is helpful.
So I think oh, go ahead, John Mirsky. I've got a question, but go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, I think one of the things that I've questioned is what is the barrier? Because I did spend a little bit of time poking around and looking at some of the site plan fees and all. And in terms of actual dollars that are charged for some of the services, it really didn't impress me as being that much, you know, that to start a development process with the cost of, say, a manager review or looking at the wetland permits, et cetera, I added up to something like $11,000. If you put all three that were enumerated, that were described in the document together, it just didn't seem like that much money. So I guess is the barrier something else beyond just dollars for that administrative process?
Is that a rhetorical question, or is that meant to be?
No, it's a real question.
I mean, I guess I would say without being deep in this process, I do believe that this group of things that they brought forward were things that they understand to be somewhat of an obstacle together. You know, I think it is true that like anybody that's not already interested in doing green developments probably isn't going to flip the switch. But I think what it does is make people who are trying to do the right thing, I think it makes this move faster for them. I mean, I think you're right. I believe you when you say it's $11,000, that's probably not going to make a huge difference. However, when it comes to that plus, you know, a slow review or extra time, I think it can make a difference.
So I think it may be more time than dollars, possibly. But I guess what I would like us to consider as the Environmental Commission is, are there any environmental issues that have to be considered, you know, as we move this forward? So we would get a gain from the beneficial electrification itself, the less greenhouse gas emissions, but there are also greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with the embodied materials of development, you know, so I don't know where the cost benefit is on that as well. So that's just something I just would like us to think about. The end, not really a question. Commissioner Mirsky.
Thank you. First of all, thanks very much for bringing this in front of the Environmental Commission. The Energy Commission has yet to have this on its agenda. I assume it will at some point. But as you might imagine, I have a fair amount to say, and Rita, you just shut me down when it's appropriate to shut me down. First of all, I was going to end with this a minute ago, but now I think I'll switch the order of which I say things. The Energy Commission and the 2030 District in one of the OSI 2030 District Lunch and Learns has had a developer, an architect from the East Coast present. His name is Tim McDonald. His firm is called Onion Flats. And last year, I reached out to him. So he presented to the commission in 2022, the Energy Commission. And I asked him, I told him, what we're struggling with here in Ann Arbor. I asked him what's going on with him. And I have to acknowledge that birds of a feather stick together. So this may not be very indicative of the broader community. But he fed back to me that all the developers that he knows that are doing multifamily developments or similar ones like hotels, and the firm is in Philadelphia and he's in Boston. All of the developers that he knows are doing all electric simply because it's cheaper. So if that is true, at least to some degree in some areas, what I'm wondering and what I hope city staff and administration as well as council will struggle with is what is really necessary as far as providing a bonus, and I would say how long do we provide this bonus, because at some point maybe what's happening on the coasts will happen here in the Midwest and we may not need to provide these, and we shouldn't be providing a bonus for something that really is not even necessary. The other thing that I would ask that council consider doing or asking the city to do is to benchmark what other communities are doing to incentivize. I realize that sticks may not be on up for discussion, but what are other jurisdictions doing to promote this kind of construction, because the whole country is dealing with this, and Ann Arbor has a lot of peer cities in lots of states with very progressive building codes and ones that are not very progressive. I mean, you can go all the way from Wisconsin, that's still, everything is controlled by Republicans, to the two coasts where, they're Democratic states and they may be promoted more by the codes. But I think it's really important to understand what are benchmarks, and those should hopefully inform what we do. Specifically, I just have a couple of questions and comments. Why 30%? I know it's sort of carried over, but my understanding is that the city is dropping this for affordable housing because it really didn't work. And maybe I'm misunderstanding that. You can comment, you can respond later if you want to, or you can do it right now.
That's not true. We didn't get rid of it.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
We got rid of the FAR premium, that's
right, it was FAR. You're right. Yep. Okay. I think the question stands: is 30% necessary? Is 12.5% necessary? Is 40% necessary? What's really necessary? How big is the hurdle? And what do we need to do to get them over the top? And it's going to vary certainly, from developer to developer, but roughly we should have a sense of why 30% works. About points 2B through D that were already discussed, I don't expect an answer on this, but I think it's important to understand which of these differ from some of the recommendations that are being made more broadly by city administration, and in particular John Fournier, that would apply across the board. And if they apply across the board, then they're not really an incentive for sustainable housing. And I just want to mention two other things that I know that you heard from the Wolfpack last week. I think you attended the Wolfpack meeting, and I'm a member of that, but I had to miss the meeting.
I wasn't sure if I was allowed to talk about the Wolfpack. It sounds like a secret society, so.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate characteristic of it. In any case, I thought it was too, by the way. I know a big issue is DTE grid upgrades, and we had a presentation in the Energy Commission from DTE about upgrades. One of the things that I was really concerned with is there was nothing you could hang your hat on. There were a lot of statements that were generalizations and how great the grid was going to be and how it's going to be one of the top 5 in the country, without anything really indicating what are metrics that are really going to define that. And we know that several proposed developments that were planned for all electric, including the 17-story one that just recently got shot down, was going to be all electric, except DTE said that they couldn't provide the required power for it. So if DTE is doing this great and wonderful grid upgrade, yet they cannot provide the power for that, there's some kind of a disconnect. And then another thing, and I'll be providing some information hopefully on this, but my read of DTE's last report shows that their natural gas business is more profitable than their electric business. Like the margin is like 18% compared to 13%. So the question is whether it's happening in people's minds consciously or unconsciously, or just the way people and leadership are asking kinds of questions. Is there an incentive for DTE to continue to essentially have new buildings go in that are natural gas connected just because their profits are higher? And then the last thing I wanted to say is I was one of the authors of the EV charging ordinance, and apparently that is leading to some confusion where, because there's an expectation that EV charging infrastructure be put in, or at least be ready or capable, that amount of charging demand on the grid is one of the reasons that's driving DTE to say that it cannot provide that level of power to a new all-electric building with all those EV chargers. And it's my interpretation, and I'm going to go back to everybody that was on the group and ask about writing a letter to clarify this. It's at least my understanding, the way we wrote it, was that the charging ordinance applied to the building and not the grid outside the building. And so that any changes to the building in terms of panels and conduit and things like that was only to the building and was not a requirement on DTE, where DTE would have to install this huge amount of capability for EV charging at some future time in the moment, where every single parking place potentially is EV charging a vehicle, potentially even all at the same time. So I intend to try to issue a clarification on that. So those are just a couple of things that I wanted to share. But I think the most important one is, what are the lessons learned and benchmarks from other communities? And before we do something here that streamlines the process and gives incentives, to really sure that those are appropriate. Thanks very much. Thanks, Rita.
Great comments. Anyone else? I just want to call out some information that Councilmember Dish provided us, that was sent to, that I had asked Aaron to send to us all, that has to do with the DTE new business plan or something like that. So that's something that looks like it's still under development as well, early new business consultation option. That also has a fee, but it looks like it's indicated that there's much work to be done on it. So I think that would be something that we'd want to understand as well, and how that would apply to a developer versus anybody else. Right. Sorry, Councilmember Ackman.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I appreciate the feedback. I took a bunch of notes so that I can share them with Councilmember Dish. Oh, crap, I had it in my head and it left. Oh, yeah, one of the big things I took away from the conversation with the Wolfpack was, the need for education. A lot of this is an information gap, and it's all around. So even when people bring innovative projects, our internal processes, and that's in the economic development report too, our internal processes don't necessarily support it because it's not routine. It's different and it's a learning curve for everybody. And so I don't know, I appreciate the work that they're doing around how can we educate people. And we're doing some of that at the level of the city, like we're spinning up this energy concierge, but I think that's mostly aimed at residential. So I don't know. I don't think it directly impacts this particular effort to incentivize, but I think that it's fair to say that as this becomes more normalized, we saw this actually, what I learned about the FAR premium, I forget, I think it's not technically a premium, whatever it was. We used to have bonuses for building residential downtown because we were having a hard time getting people to build housing downtown. Then, of course, they realized we don't need to incentivize that anymore. Everyone wants to build housing downtown. So I appreciate what you're saying. Things change and sometimes things need to be incentivized and then they don't because they're either cheaper to do or they're easier to do or so also appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
And I'll just say one last thing. There was an article just yesterday in the Washington Post about builders lobbying against electrification. So there are a lot of things going on that make this really, really complicated, right? It's like we would love to have the state building code upgraded to the point where we don't have to fight or even think about incentives. It's just required. And I believe that that's the intent behind all of this. Yeah, that's all. Commissioner Mirsky.
Very quickly, I reported on it a couple of months ago, but the Home Energy Advisor program is now live. It's a separate website because it's being run through a contract with a third party, Elevate Energy, and I think they even have a partner. But I checked just the other day, and so we are all paying for this. There's a millage that is funding this. And if there's a lot of people, even myself included, that don't understand all the in and outs of all these things. And so if you're thinking about doing something, by all means, use this service and tell other people. We definitely want people who are, we want to do economic justice together with environmental justice with a lot of our programs. But please get the word out that this program is there. And I know that the city has done a lot of great work on this. They have sort of a generalized workflow or roadmap to electrify. And I know that they're using some tools that have been used by Rocky Mountain Institute or IMI. So please definitely get the word out. That to John's question was a really good question. I didn't think of it either. But that's one of the major things. And I think Councilmember Ekman, I think the city is even looking at some incentives that would be on top of the incentives that are in the IRA. So that would be addressed. Some of the questions that John said, they just weren't addressed by the administrator in his memo. That's it. Thanks.
Yep, thank you. And I guess I have a question. Is that information available on the web for the onboarding of, or people to access the Elevate program?
There's a website. You just do a search for like Ann Arbor Home Energy Advisor. It's not an a2gov.org site. At least I didn't see a link to it that way. And there's a submission form. So there's a web page and there's a submission form. So you fill that out and then you get contacted from that.
Great. Okay. All right. Any last questions? Seeing none. I'm going to move us forward, and thank you for that discussion. It's really very interesting. And I hope we'll have an opportunity to talk about it again or just get an update on it. That would be great. I want to go to our reports. Let's start with our committees / work groups. And I'm going to start with biodiversity. Commissioner Curtis, would you like to lead?
Sure. We had a meeting last month and Ann Marson came and we talked with her quite a bit about the invasive species in the recreational park areas and what we can or can't do and what parks will and won't do at this point in time. And then Sean Reynolds came and we talked to him about pollinators and on the website. And that was really just a kickoff of a discussion. And we've had some other emails going back and forth on that. So there's still quite a bit more work to go on that, but it's progressing.
Right. Yep. And I have to say, I participated in that group and I really enjoy it. Circular economy, I believe that's John Calloway.
Sure. Sarah covered several things in her update to the commission earlier this evening. I'll just add a few things. So we're almost at the end of kind of our research and data collection. We're hoping to talk with one more municipality. We've talked with 4 at this point, mostly cities. Earlier this week, we spoke with King County in Washington State about county level approaches. So that was kind of an interesting comparison. We're hoping to connect with folks in Chicago. They seem to have some really interesting things that would be applicable here. And then our next steps are going to be kind of putting together some of the key points that we've identified through all this work, and also a stakeholder map that we put together to kind of show who's going to bring what, or what are the key issues that need to be considered at the various points along this, because it's a whole ecosystem, right? Just like many topics that we look at, and what's coming in, what's going out, where does it go, and all those different pieces along the chain to make sure we've got an understanding of that, so that we don't, what we're learning along the way is like, well, we did this, but then we had to change it because we learned this, and we're trying to like get ahead of that now. Anya also gave some really great information on work going on at the university that we're learning from and identifying contacts. So yeah, the next step is to kind of put that all together and then bring that around to lots of different groups, city staff, perhaps this group, to get input on kind of what we've put together before we kind of move forward with, potentially an ordinance. I don't know, Anya, Bridget, anybody else want to add anything on that? Oh, okay, thanks.
Thank you. Next up is water quality.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Rita. Yeah, the committee hasn't met during the past month. And so the water quality work group, but I'll say that we are attending, Rita and I are attending the Mid-Huron Partners meeting that's led by the Huron River Watershed Council about various water quality topics. And they had their quarterly meeting earlier today, and I can report that E. coli counts in the river and most of the tributaries are very good. They're below state standards for swimming, for example. And there's a committee that's working on as you all recall, the city filed a consent judgment with Eagle about phosphorus pollution of the Huron River that comes both from stormwater and from the wastewater treatment plant. And so there is a committee that's working on a plan to do that that I think I'm invited to, but I'll let people know in the future how that's going. And other than that, it seems like Swift Run is a major problem for both for phosphorus, nitrogen, and for salts. And so most of the problems with conductivity, the measurement is called conductivity, but it mostly relates to how much road salt is being washed into the river. And it surprised me that Swift Run is a major outlier within Ann Arbor on that regard. So that's all I have to say. If there's no questions.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Councilmember Ackman, would you like to report anything from council?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if folks are aware that we had a memo that was attached to our city council agenda this week from the city administrator and Dr. Stoltz and Mr. Stiglitz about staff recommendations on next steps related to achieving 100% renewable energy by 2030. I recommend you go and read it if you haven't already, but basically they are recommending that in order to achieve our goal of 100% renewable energy by 2030, that we have a vote in November to formally authorize a sustainable energy utility. And this is basically using our local storage, solar panels, things like that. Then we would pursue a grant, assuming that it passed, to start that up. And then enter into a virtual power purchase agreement to fill the gap to reach our goal. They provide some background in this. And then also at the end, while they don't recommend They don't recommend for or recommend against next steps in a municipal energy, fully municipal utility. They do tell us what next steps would be. So they advise that if we decide to continue consideration of full municipalization, that we do the SEU first to avoid confusion amongst the public about the difference between these two things. And that if we pursue this, we do it with the goal of generating an appraisal of DTE's assets, any stranded costs, updated annual rate projections, and other analyses. Basically, we need full information to bring to voters before we would decide to advance this. So it's basically a phase 2, but it's saying what we need to get out of the phase 2. So anyway, that was a memo. You know, we will have to take action and next steps, but wanted you to be aware of that.
Great, that's really important. Thanks. Energy Work Commission, Commissioner Mirsky.
Our last meeting, we had basically three updates, but I think they would all be of interest to commissioners and the public. First was an update on the city's work in the Bryant neighborhood. City's really doing a great job there. And they're really taking a holistic approach. So if you just look at the slides, you'll get a good sense. If you want to, you can watch it on YouTube. Since we have Councilmember Ackerman on, I would only point out that Bryant is one neighborhood with 260 units, and we have around 50 neighborhoods in Ann Arbor with 50,000 units. So one of the points I made at the meeting is we really need to scale up the efforts and take the lessons learned and best practices from Bryant and apply them elsewhere. I realize not all of them are going to carry over, but we do have some other environmental justice neighborhoods. There's, for example, a trailer park off of Packard Road, and I don't know what the city is doing there. So that was really interesting. Another update that we got was from Jan Culbertson, who's an architect and leads the 2030 district. She gave us a status update on the Michigan Energy Code update. That looks to be like it's going to have a significant increase in energy efficiency, roughly 10%. And the problem is that it's not going to do a whole lot in terms of electrification. The supplement that would allow Ann Arbor, for example, to require all electric developments or something similar to that, where it'd be offset with offsite renewables. That's called the Zero Code. That's not planned right now. So unfortunately, that won't be happening. And then the last thing is that we had a presentation from U of MC's Dean Overpeck about the state of climate research. And he presented a lot of information that probably most of us have been seeing as lay people here and there. It was a little bit obviously more comprehensive. I think his takeaway was the most important one, or two of them actually. One is that we need to do more faster, because it looks pretty clear to him, even though there's a little bit of debate in the climate community. And by the way, this is his training. He is a renowned scientist that specializes in climate, particularly on the water and rain side, but precipitation. But he said it's pretty clear. Recent data shows that the rate of warming is exceeding. I think most people read last year we already exceeded 1.5 C. And the other thing that he talked at some length about is this idea of reaching tipping points. He showed a map showing a whole variety of different tipping points, and there's mounting evidence that we are reaching or approaching some of these tipping points. Some of these could be really catastrophic. So again, the message: move fast, move more quicker and faster. And I just wanted to mention one thing about the and we don't need to answer it, but there was a couple of articles actually in MLive quoting DTE's chairman Jerry Norcia, I think is you pronounce his name, saying that DTE says that it is committed to partnering with the city to providing 100% renewable energy for the city. I think we need to hold DTE's feet to the fire, SCU or no SCU. If that's what he's saying, then what specifically are they going to do? And by the way, he used the word energy. He didn't use the word electricity. So that means also, he said, meaning apparently natural gas, and he used the date by 2030. So it would be really interesting to me if a portion of city council or city leadership were to invite him or DTE executives to really elaborate on how they're willing to partner with the city to do what he made these comments publicly that were at some kind of a ribbon cutting. I think it was at the development that's down on the Huron River that's on the former DTE Mishcon site. So it would be really interesting to understand what he meant by that. So those are updates from the Energy Commission.
Thank you. Very interesting. So our next commission would be PAC, but Commissioner Marson is absent. And the next one is planning, and that ordinarily would be Councilmember Dish, who is absent. I don't think we have an alternate for that. So we'll go on to the chair's report. That's me. This is something just in addition that was really kind of fun. There's some work on the small pocket forest called Miyawaki Forest. And I've just worked recently, and the biodiversity group also had some input on some communication that will go out to people who will be receiving plants from Sean Reynolds for the 10,000 Trees program, and possibly from the Washtenaw County Extension, Conservation District, providing them with information on care of the trees and shrubs. And it's pretty cool, basic, but good information. And lastly, I just want to actually move to the next part to ask Aaron to talk with us just briefly on the report that was attached to the staff report that was attached to our agenda about the Gelman plume. And I want to just say that I really appreciate the staff report. It's like really wonderful to see it, the support and the specificity that I saw in it. And where are you, Erin? I'm not seeing. There you are.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Rita. So the staff update was just the one update on so the Gelman Sciences NPDES permit was released for public review a few weeks ago. The deadline is tomorrow to submit public comments on their draft permit, and I went ahead and attached the city's comments that were submitted to the state yesterday. So that's public information at this point. I guess a quick summary would be that there were very little changes made in the permit from previous years. And so I think our comments really center around protection of our drinking water intake at Barton Pond. We kind of outlined 5 overall comments. I think the general theme being kind of challenging Eagle a little bit and not being complacent in their selection of the best available technology for 1,4-dioxane. And I think we also, I guess the overall objective of our comments, in addition to just providing Eagle with our feedback, also was knowing that EPA will be taking over management of the site, and we wanted to document our comments in that context as well. And then we kind of close out our comments with saying, suggesting if the discharge location was in fact moved downstream of our intake, this would be kind of a non-issue. But for folks that are less familiar with the permit, the Gelman site, their pump and treat system, they have to then discharge that process water and for which they need the NPDES permit, the discharge permit. And it enters into a tributary of Honey Creek, which then Honey Creek is a tributary to the Huron River. So that's kind of the focus of our comments. Commissioner Brown?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I want to thank you, Aaron, and city staff for that very precise comment to Eagle. But it's not clear to me and probably to most people when would this NPDES permit come into force? In other words, when are those actions required of?
So
When,
it'll be a renewal permit of their current permit, basically.
Yeah.
So I think they'll, I don't know if they have actually a cutoff date for when they have to reply to all, consider all public comment. But I imagine it would be sometime this year that the permit would be finalized.
Okay, so Eagle would issue the permit this year. That's the expectation. And when would the polluter compliance when would their compliance be judged?
I think that their permit would probably, I'm not sure how soon their permit would go into play. I'm guessing since their permit is currently, it's been administratively extended, so it's expired at this point. So I don't know if it would start kind of at the first of next year or if they would go ahead and kind of finalize the permit and then it would be effective immediately. I'm not sure if there would be a delay between those two things or not.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, thanks. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, you're on mute, Rita.
Sorry, thanks. I just want to say that I also looked at the submitted report from the Coalition for Action on Remediation of Dioxide in the CARD group. And they recommended a public hearings, which I hope that would be something that the city could support as well. I think it's worthwhile. We've gone through all of this, and I think to have the public know the kinds of things that the city submitted, the increased frequency of testing is a really good thing, and the criteria of allowing less dioxin in the effluent is really important for people to know and show their support for it to Eagle directly. And I love the downstream relocation idea. And I also just wanted to say that I just saw before we started the meeting, the Congresswoman Dingell's letter of support of feedback from our local officials and activists. And that was also very gratifying. She's been very supportive for this, moving this forward and after its long history for a long time. So anyway, that's it. Any other comments or questions about that report or anything? Okay, then the next item on our agenda is just to say that I welcome your input on items for our next agenda. The next meeting is scheduled for March 28th. So please be in touch if you have anything specific that you would like to discuss at that meeting or any subsequent meeting. And now, everybody watch me. Am I on target? I believe it's the second public comment time. And here we go. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 962-0336-6453. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand by calling out the last 3 digits of your phone number. At that point, press *6 to unmute your phone. In order to electronically raise your hand, press *9 on your phone. Did I do that? You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. And when speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background noise so that we may hear you clearly. So please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. And Aaron, is anyone available to make a
No.
comment?
I'm not seeing anybody. No.
Okay. I think we'll just accept that. Seems like it's one of those nights. And I would say I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Anybody? Okay, everybody just raise your hand and let's say goodnight. Thank you. This is really a good discussion. I appreciate you all. See ya.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Well done.